I was sitting on the couch with a cold beer in my hand, the television blaring with the manufactured excitement of a football game. My team was ahead, the digital crowd roaring from the speakers, but I barely noticed. My mind wasn't on the game. It hadn't been for weeks. Instead, it was circling, a predator in a cage, relentlessly returning to the same nagging thoughts, the same dissonant details that refused to add up. My wife of 7 years, Emily, had always been my North Star, steady, reliable, a fixed point in the chaotic constellation of my life. I had never had a reason to doubt her. But now, something wasn't right. The architecture of our life, a structure I had believed to be unshakably sound, was groaning under a stress I couldn't identify. It had started subtly, so insidiously that I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment the first seed of doubt was planted. Maybe it was when she began disappearing more often in the evenings. She always had a reason, of course. Her best friend, Mia, was navigating the treacherous, shark-infested waters of a nasty divorce, and Emily had appointed herself Mia's emotional bodyguard, her rock. She spent hours comforting her, listening, supporting. At first, I admired her for it. That's who Emily was. Compassionate, selfless, a woman who always put others before herself. I even encouraged her to take the time. Mia needs you, I'd said, a good, supportive husband, never imagining I would come to regret those words, that they would become a key component in an elaborate, deceptive machine. But then, the little things, the hairline fractures in the facade, started to bother me. Last week, she'd come home late, close to midnight. I was half asleep on the couch when I heard her keys in the door. She walked in with that calm, serene smile she always wore, her face relaxed. She told me she and Mia had been at a cozy little cafe downtown, talking for hours, losing track of time. It was a reasonable explanation, and I wanted to believe her. But as she walked past me to hang up her coat, I caught it. A faint, unfamiliar scent. Men's cologne. It wasn't overpowering, but it was distinct, a dark, musky note that was entirely out of place in our world of clean laundry and Emily's light, floral perfume. I tried to brush it off. Cafes are crowded places, right? Maybe a waiter, or someone sitting at a nearby table, wore it. It happens. But no matter how logical that sounded, the thought lingered in the back of my mind, a splinter I couldn't quite remove. Then there was the Saturday incident. Emily said she was going out to buy new curtains for the living room, a perfectly normal, domestic errand. But she was gone for 5 hours. When she finally came back, she had several shopping bags in tow, complete with receipts, a preemptive strike against any potential suspicion. She had been shopping. Everything seemed above board. Until I noticed the bottle of red wine tucked into one of the bags. Expensive red wine. Emily never drank red wine. She was strictly a white wine or cocktail kind of woman. "Oh, it's for Mia," she said, when I asked about it. Her smile easy, her explanation perfectly reasonable. "She's been getting into red wine lately, and I thought it would make a nice gift. But something about it felt off. Why buy such an expensive bottle for a casual gift? And why not mention it beforehand?" I didn't press her, but it stuck with me. These little things, they were starting to stack up. Emily was always composed, always prepared with an answer. She never hesitated, never stumbled. Her phone wasn't hidden. It sat openly on the table or the kitchen counter. If she was hiding something, she was doing an exceptional, almost sociopathic, job of it. But then, there was the text. One evening, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I glanced at the screen. It was a message from Mia. Asterisk, "Thank you for being with me last night. Did you have to leave early? I hope he didn't suspect anything." Asterisk. My stomach tightened as I stared at the words. For a moment, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. But I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Texts can be misinterpreted, right? When Emily came out of the shower, I handed her the phone and mentioned the message. She read it quickly, then sighed, a small, dramatic sound. "Mia's overthinking again," she said with a laugh. "I keep telling her you're not some monster who's going to blow up if I come home late." Her words were light-hearted, her tone playful, but they didn't sit right with me. I just nodded and let it slide. What else could I do? Accuse her of something based on a gut feeling? I didn't want to be that husband, the paranoid, controlling cliché. But that one message, those 3 short sentences, kept replaying in my mind, over and over, like a broken record. I started paying closer attention, making mental notes of everything. The more I watched, the more the little details added up. The doubts were growing louder, harder to ignore. I wasn't sure what was going on, but I knew one thing. Something wasn't right. And I wasn't the kind of man to sit quietly while my gut told me my house was on fire. It was time to find the truth. I've always prided myself on being a rational man. A man who deals in facts and evidence, not feelings and intuition. But my wife, Emily, had a way of explaining things that could make even the most irrational situation seem perfectly logical. Her words were always carefully chosen, delivered with a calm, unwavering confidence that made doubting her feel almost absurd, a personal failing on my part. For the longest time, I believed every word. Why wouldn't I? She was my wife, my partner, the woman I trusted with every part of my life. But lately, her explanations had begun to feel rehearsed, too polished. It was as though she had anticipated my questions before I even asked them, and had prepared her responses with the meticulous care of a lawyer preparing for trial. Take the night, she came home smelling of men's cologne. I had asked her about it, my tone a carefully constructed imitation of casual curiosity, trying to hide the unease that was a cold, coiling thing in my chest. "Oh, that," she had said, with a light, easy laugh. "It must have been from the cafe. You know how crowded those places get. Someone probably brushed past me." It made sense. Cafes were crowded, full of people coming and going. It could have been a waiter or someone seated at a nearby table. I nodded and let it go, convincing myself I was overthinking it. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Then there was the bottle of red wine. Emily had gone out shopping for curtains, a normal enough errand, and had come back with several bags, the receipts to match. She had even taken the time to lay out the curtains she had bought, asking for my opinion on the color. Everything seemed fine, until I spotted the wine, tucked neatly into one of the bags. Expensive red wine. Emily didn't drink red wine. She had never liked it. I had asked her about it, trying to sound curious rather than suspicious. "Oh, that's for Mia," she had said, with that same, easy smile. "She's been getting into red wine lately, and I thought it would make a nice gift." Her answer was so smooth, so perfectly reasonable, that I couldn't argue with it. Why wouldn't she buy her best friend a thoughtful gift, especially considering everything Mia was going through? But as she spoke, I couldn't help but wonder, why hadn't she mentioned it earlier? Why buy such an expensive bottle for a casual gift? The doubts simmered beneath the surface, but I didn't press her. I didn't want to start a fight over something that, on paper, seemed so harmless. Still, I made a mental note. Emily's behavior wasn't just consistent, it was impeccable. Her explanations were always logical, her tone unwavering. There was never a slip, never a moment of hesitation. It was as if she had rehearsed every possible question I might ask, and had the answers ready to go. Even her phone, always in plain sight, sitting openly on the counter or the coffee table, seemed to back up her claims of having nothing to hide. If she was lying, she was doing an incredible, almost masterful, job of covering her tracks. But then came the text from Mia. Asterisk, "Thank you for being with me last night. Did you have to leave early? I hope he didn't suspect anything." Asterisk, the words replayed in my head, over and over. When I had asked Emily about it, her response was immediate, almost dismissive. "Mia's overthinking again," she'd said, with a roll of her eyes. "I keep telling her you're not some jealous control freak." Her explanation was plausible, but the tone didn't match her usual way of speaking about me. And why was Mia suddenly acting so cryptic? The more I thought about it, the less sense it made. Over the next few days, I started to notice other things. Her phone, once freely used while we watched TV, was now sitting face down more often. When I asked her what she was doing, she'd shrug and say, "Just tired of scrolling," or "Nothing interesting online today." It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a shift in her behavior, in the way she interacted with me. Then came the evening she announced she'd be spending time with Mia again. Same story, different day. I smiled, told her to be safe, and watched as she walked out the door. Sitting alone in the quiet of our living room, I tried to tell myself that everything was fine. But the little inconsistencies were piling up, forming a picture I didn't want to see. Her excuses were too perfect, too airtight. Nobody was that consistent. As much as I wanted to believe her, my gut told me otherwise. I kept replaying every conversation in my head, dissecting her words, searching for the cracks in her armor. If she was lying, she was better at it than anyone I had ever known. But even the best liars slip up eventually. And I was resolved to find the truth. I wasn't going to accuse her outright. Not yet. I needed more than a gut feeling. I needed proof. Emily might have her perfect alibis, but I wasn't the fool she thought I was. The game had started, and I was determined to win. They say trust is the foundation of every strong marriage. For years, I believed that. I believed that Emily and I had built our marriage on a foundation of solid, unshakable bedrock. But as I sat in the living room that evening, staring at her phone, lying face down on the kitchen counter, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. It wasn't a dramatic, earth-shattering change, nothing anyone else would have noticed. But I knew Emily better than anyone. Or at least, I thought I did. Little things, barely perceptible, had started to catch my attention. She wasn't using her phone as much around me anymore. Normally, she'd be scrolling through social media or texting friends while we watched TV together. Now, the phone was there, but it was untouched, a silent, black slab, sitting screen down on the coffee table or the kitchen counter. It wasn't like her. I told myself I was overthinking it, that I was letting my paranoia creep in where it didn't belong. But then I would remember the text from Mia, the one that had set this whole, sickening chain of events into motion. Asterisk, thank you for being with me last night. Did you have to leave early? I hope he didn't suspect anything. Asterisk. I tried to brush it off, to believe Emily's easy, practiced explanation that Mia was simply overthinking things. But the words had lodged themselves in my mind like a splinter, a small, sharp, persistent irritant. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't just ignore the signs any longer. I wasn't going to be that husband, the one who snooped through his wife's phone, or followed her around like some pathetic character in a bad soap opera. That wasn't me. But I also couldn't just sit back and pretend everything was fine, not when my own gut, my own intuition, was screaming at me that it wasn't. So I started paying attention. Not in an obvious way. Emily was too sharp for that. But quietly, carefully. I took mental notes of her comings and goings, of the timing of her excuses, of the little things that didn't quite add up. Like the other night, when she came home late after another coffee shop chat with Mia. She seemed relaxed, smiling as she kicked off her shoes and walked into the kitchen. But there was a faint flush to her cheeks, like she'd been out in the cold for too long. And her coat, it smelled faintly of that same men's cologne again. I didn't say anything. I just watched as she hung up her coat and made herself a cup of tea, humming softly under her breath. The next morning, I noticed that she had left her phone on the counter again, something she always did before heading into the shower. But this time, I paid closer attention. When it buzzed, I glanced at the screen, just a quick look, not enough to feel like I was crossing a line. It was another text from Mia. Asterisk, let me know when you're free again. Last night was amazing. I hope he didn't notice anything. Asterisk. My chest tightened. Last night was amazing. It could have meant anything, I told myself. Maybe Mia was just grateful for Emily's support, for the time she'd spent helping her through a tough situation. But why the secrecy? Why the cryptic, coded tone? I handed Emily her phone when she came out of the shower, her hair wrapped in a towel. She read the message quickly, her expression unreadable. Mia's just being dramatic again, she said with a laugh, tossing the phone onto the couch. I just nodded, pretending to believe her. But my doubts were growing, metastasizing. Over the next few days, I became more deliberate in my observations. I watched how she carried herself, how her tone shifted when I asked about her plans. I noticed that she started taking longer to get ready before heading out. Her outfits casual but carefully chosen, her makeup subtle but just enough to suggest an effort. When she came home, she was always cheerful, always quick to offer detailed, plausible explanations for her whereabouts. Mia needed to talk about some paperwork for the divorce. We were just catching up on old memories. Her stories were convincing, even compelling, but they were too perfect. And then there was her routine at home. Emily had always been composed, always organized, but now, it felt like she was playing a part. She still made coffee in the mornings, still kissed me on the cheek before leaving for work, but there was a distance in her eyes, a flicker of something I couldn't quite place. I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I needed more than suspicion. I needed something concrete, something she couldn't talk her way out of. So I kept watching, waiting, for a slip, for a crack in her carefully constructed armor. Emily was good at this game, but I was learning the rules. The hardest part was pretending that everything was normal. When she smiled at me across the dinner table, I smiled back. When she kissed me goodnight, I kissed her too. But in the back of my mind, I was always searching, always questioning. Every detail mattered now. What time she left, when she came back, what she wore, how she smelled, what she said. It was exhausting, keeping track of it all. But I couldn't stop. If Emily was hiding something, I was going to find out. One way or another. And when I did, I'd be ready. It was time for a plan. Sitting on the couch with a lukewarm beer in my hand, I realized that all the overthinking, all the quiet, passive observation in the world wasn't going to give me the answers I needed. If Emily was lying, if there was something going on behind my back, then I needed proof. Hard, irrefutable evidence. I wasn't about to confront her without it. Emily was too smart, too composed. She'd just talk her way out of it, twist my words, and somehow, by the end of the conversation, I'd be the one apologizing, feeling like a paranoid, insecure fool. No, I couldn't afford to rely on accusations alone. I needed to catch her in the act. The idea came to me while I was watching an old, black-and-white detective show. The protagonist, a grizzled, world-weary PI, had used a simple piece of tape to see if someone had tampered with a locked drawer. It was simple, subtle, and almost foolproof. That night, while Emily was getting ready to head out for yet another evening spent comforting Mia, I slipped into the garage and grabbed a roll of clear, heavy-duty tape. My heart was pounding as I carefully tore off a small, thin piece and placed it along the lower edge of the driver's seat in her car. If she adjusted the seat, or if someone else, someone taller or shorter, sat there, the tape would tear or shift. It was a small thing, something Emily would never notice unless she was actively looking for it. And that's what made it perfect. She left the house at exactly 7 p.m., dressed casually but with that same, familiar air of effort. Jeans that fit just right, a simple silk blouse, and a hint of a perfume that lingered in the air long after she had kissed me goodbye. "Don't wait up," she said with a smile. And then, she was gone. For the next 4 hours, I sat in the oppressive silence of the house, trying to distract myself with the television. But my eyes kept darting to the clock. 8 p.m., 9:30 p.m., 10:45 p.m. Each passing minute felt heavier than the last. Finally, at 11:15 p.m., I heard the familiar jingle of her keys in the door. She walked in, looking a little tired, but in high spirits. She headed straight to the kitchen to make herself a cup of tea. "Long night?" I asked, my voice a carefully constructed imitation of casualness. "Yeah, Mia's having a rough time," she said, her voice steady. "We went through some old photo albums. You know how emotional she gets." I just nodded, pretending to buy it. As she settled into her nightly routine, I excused myself and headed out to the garage. My heart raced as I opened her car door and crouched down to inspect the tape. It was completely undisturbed. The seat hadn't moved an inch. I should have felt relieved. This should have been the moment when my paranoia was put to rest, when I could finally let go of the doubts that had been gnawing at me. But instead, I felt even more unsettled. If Emily wasn't meeting someone, if she wasn't using her car to go anywhere other than Mia's, then how was she getting around? The following weekend, she announced she'd be spending another evening with Mia. "We're going to her place this time," she said, pulling on her coat. "Just a quiet night in. I'll probably be back late." I smiled and told her to have a good time. But the moment she was out the door, I grabbed my phone and sent her a text. "Hey, I was thinking, what if I drop by with some pizza? I'm sure you and Mia could use a break." It took her 10 minutes to respond. When the reply finally came, it was flawless. "Oh, honey, that's so sweet. But we're discussing something really personal tonight. I think Mia would feel uncomfortable. But thank you. You're the best." It was the perfect answer. Too perfect. Logical, considerate, and exactly what I would expect her to say if everything was above board. But it didn't sit right with me. So I decided to take it a step further. I dialed Mia's number directly. She picked up after a few rings, her voice sounding slightly tense. "Oh, hi, Jason. What's up?" "Just checking in," I said casually. "Emily mentioned she's with you tonight. Everything okay?" There was a brief hesitation on her end. It was barely noticeable, but enough to make my stomach tighten. Yeah, she's here, Mia said quickly. She's in the bathroom right now. We've just been talking. Thanks for checking in. Her tone was off, rushed, like she was trying too hard to sound normal. I thanked her and hung up, but my mind was already racing. If Emily was really with Mia, then why did Mia sound so nervous? I didn't have any answers yet, but the pieces were starting to fall into place. Emily might have thought she was 2 steps ahead of me, but I was catching up. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I sat on the couch that evening, the television a mindless, flickering presence in the darkened room, staring at my phone. I replayed her text in my head, over and over again. Asterisk. Oh, honey, that's so sweet. But we're discussing something really personal tonight. I think Mia would feel uncomfortable. But thank you. You're the best. Asterisk. It was the perfect response. It was a masterclass in deflection, a beautiful, intricate piece of deception. It was crafted to simultaneously diffuse my suspicion and stroke my ego. But that was the problem. It was too perfect. The logic held up, sure, but it felt rehearsed, scripted. The night before, when I had tried to call Mia to confirm Emily's story, her voice had sounded just slightly off, a little too eager, a little too quick to reassure me that Emily was with her. The hesitation before her words, though brief, was a crack in the otherwise flawless facade. Emily had always said that trust was the glue that held a marriage together. And for 7 years, I had believed that. I had lived by that principle. But now, that glue was cracking under the weight of 1,000 unanswered questions. I needed to test her story further. I needed to push the boundaries of her lies and see how far they would stretch. The next morning, over breakfast, Emily casually mentioned a work networking event that was coming up at a downtown hotel. It's mandatory, she said, buttering her toast with the same easy grace as if she were discussing the weather. Just a bunch of boring speeches and awkward small talk. I just nodded, pretending to sympathize. Sounds dreadful, I said with a chuckle. But as soon as she left for work, I picked up my phone and called Jake, an old college buddy who worked security at that very hotel. Jake was one of those guys, a rare and precious commodity, who would do anything for a friend, no questions asked. And I was counting on that loyalty now. Hey Jake, I said, when he picked up. Listen, I need a favor. My wife's attending some work event at your hotel tomorrow night. Could you just keep an eye out for her? Let me know if you see her and who she's with. Jake hesitated for a second, then agreed. Sure thing, man. Just send me her picture, and I'll keep you updated. The next evening, as Emily got ready, I watched her closely. She looked polished, but understated, her outfit casual yet carefully chosen. She kissed me on the cheek before heading out, her smile as genuine, as convincing, as ever. Don't wait up, she said. As soon as she left, I texted Jake. An hour later, he replied. Asterisk, yeah, she's here. Event seems legit. Lots of people from her company. But she's been spending a lot of time out on the terrace, talking to some guy in a gray suit. Thought you'd want to know. Asterisk. I read the message twice, my hands gripping the phone so tightly I thought it might crack. The terrace. Talking to some guy. My pulse quickened, a hot, angry, sickening dread coursing through me. When Emily got home later that night, she seemed relaxed, even cheerful. She regaled me with stories about the boring speeches, the terrible hors d'oeuvres, the awkward small talk she had endured. She even showed me a few pictures of herself with her colleagues, their smiles wide and professionally pleasant against the elegant backdrop of the hotel ballroom. I waited until she had finished her story, until she had spun her intricate, plausible web of lies. Then, I asked as casually as I could, did you get a chance to check out the terrace? I hear the views from there are amazing. She didn't miss a beat. Oh no, she said, shaking her head. I didn't really go out there. It was too windy, and everyone was staying inside. There it was. The first, undeniable crack in her armor. Jake had seen her on the terrace, talking to a man in a gray suit. And yet, here she was, calmly, confidently, telling me she hadn't even stepped foot outside. I leaned back in my chair, watching her closely. That's strange, I said, my voice carefully, dangerously even. Jake mentioned he saw you out there. For a brief, fleeting second, something flickered across her face. Confusion? Guilt? Panic? I couldn't tell. Then, she laughed, a light, dismissive sound. Jake? I didn't know he was working there. He must have mistaken me for someone else. Her deflection was smooth, but it wasn't perfect. I could feel the threads of her story, of her carefully constructed world, beginning to unravel. I looked her straight in the eyes. Is there someone else, Emily? Just tell me the truth. Her smile faltered, her confidence finally cracking, replaced by an expression that was equal parts frustration and estranged, almost theatrical, disbelief. Jason, don't be ridiculous. You know me better than that. I've always been honest with you. Maybe she had been, once. But now I wasn't so sure. That night, as she slept soundly beside me, her breathing a slow, even, innocent rhythm, I stared at the ceiling, turning over every detail in my mind. Her excuses were starting to crumble. Her lies were becoming harder to sustain. But I needed more than just cracks and suspicions. I needed proof. Solid, undeniable proof. The trap had been set. She had already stumbled, once. Now, I just had to wait for her to fall completely. I couldn't sleep that night. The image of Emily on that terrace, talking to a faceless man in a gray suit, kept replaying in my mind. Jake's text had been clear, unequivocal, and Emily's denial had been just as obvious. She was lying. And for the first time, I felt a cold, hard certainty of it. The next morning, as she moved around the kitchen, humming a soft, cheerful tune while she poured coffee, I watched her like a hawk. She seemed so at ease, so comfortable in her own skin, as if she had nothing in the world to hide. But now, every detail of her behavior, every small, innocuous gesture, felt like a puzzle piece waiting to be placed. She handed me a cup of coffee, kissed me lightly on the cheek, and smiled. "What's your plan for the day?" she asked casually. "Just the usual," I said, keeping my own tone light. "What about you?" "Busy day at work," she replied. "Meetings, emails, the usual grind." She was good. Too good. Her tone was relaxed, her movements fluid, her smile completely, utterly convincing. But now that I was paying closer attention, the cracks in the facade were becoming easier to spot. I decided to start digging. After she left for work, I went through the trash in our master bathroom, a place she rarely checked. It felt wrong, invasive, a profound violation of the man I thought I was. But I needed answers. Among the crumpled tissues and empty cosmetic packaging, I spotted them. 2 paper coffee cups. They were from a trendy, expensive downtown cafe, a place I knew she didn't frequent. The cups were fresh, barely crumpled, the logos gleaming as if they had just been tossed. Downtown, the same area where she had supposedly been spending so much time at Mia's house. Why would Emily stop at a downtown cafe for coffee if she was heading straight to Mia's? That evening, I casually mentioned the cups while we were eating dinner. "By the way," I said, "I noticed some coffee cups in the trash this morning. Did you stop for coffee last night?" She paused for a moment, just a fraction of a second, before replying. "Oh yeah," she said. "I grabbed them on the way to Mia's. You know me. I can't survive without my caffeine." Her response was smooth, logical, but something about it felt too rehearsed, too ready. "2 cups?" I asked, keeping my tone light. She smiled. "One for me, one for Mia." Thought I'd surprise her. She's been so stressed lately. The explanation fit. But the way she delivered it, the easy, practiced confidence, made my stomach churn. Her answers were always perfect, always reasonable. But when you stack up that many perfect explanations, one on top of another, they start to feel anything but reasonable. The next clue came 2 days later. Emily told me she had another work event, a team-building dinner, at another downtown hotel. Coincidentally, Jake was working security again. So I called him. "Keep an eye out for her," I said. "Let me know what you see." Hours later, Jake sent me a picture. It showed Emily, seated at a table with several of her colleagues. Everyone looked professional, and the setting seemed perfectly legitimate. But Jake had added a note that made my blood run cold. Asterisk, she stepped out for a while. Spent about 30 minutes on the terrace. Same guy as last time. Gray suit. Asterisk. I stared at the photo for a long time, my pulse pounding in my ears. The hotel event might have been real, but Emily's time on the terrace was not part of it. When she came home that night, she was cheerful, as always. She talked about the event, the terrible food, the awkward, forced icebreakers. She even showed me a few pictures of herself, smiling with her colleagues. I waited until she had finished her story, until she had spun her intricate, plausible web of lies. Then, I dropped the question. "Did you step out onto the terrace this time?" You said the view was amazing last time, didn't you? She blinked, and for a split second, I saw it again. A flicker of something in her eyes. Surprise? Panic? Then, she laughed, a light, dismissive sound. Oh no. It was too cold out tonight. Everyone stayed inside. Another lie. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I knew what I had seen. Her mask was slipping. The cracks were becoming more obvious. That night, as I lay in bed, I pieced it all together. The coffee cups, the man on the terrace, the perfect, polished excuses that didn't quite add up. I wasn't imagining things. Emily was hiding something. And now, I was more determined than ever to find out what it was. The clues were there, scattered like breadcrumbs. All I had to do was follow them to the truth. The realization hit me harder than I had expected. I couldn't do this alone. Emily was a master at creating airtight stories, her lies woven so seamlessly into the fabric of our daily lives that confronting her head-on would only give her the upper hand. If I was going to get to the truth, I needed help. So I turned to the people I trusted most. Mark, Ryan, Ethan, and Caleb. These were my closest friends, the guys I'd known for years, through thick and thin. We'd shared beers, laughs, and stories, and I had never, for a moment, doubted their loyalty. If anyone could help me, it was them. We met in my garage one evening, the air thick with the scent of motor oil and the faint, familiar hum of an old radio playing classic rock in the corner. Motorcycle parts were scattered across the workbench, a half-empty six-pack sat on a makeshift table, and the tension in the room was palpable. I laid it all out for them. Emily's late nights. The suspicious text messages. The unexplained coffee cups. The mysterious man in the gray suit on the terrace. I don't want to sound paranoid. I began, my voice steadier than I felt. But something's going on. I don't have solid proof yet, just pieces. And I need your help to figure this out. Mark was the first to speak. We're with you, man, he said, his voice a low, steady rumble. If something's happening, we'll figure it out. Ryan nodded. Yeah, just tell us what you need. We've got your back. The plan was simple. Each of them would take a turn observing Emily on her nights out. Nothing intrusive or illegal. Just quiet observation. If she was telling the truth, then great. But if not, I needed to know. The first test came quickly. Emily mentioned a work dinner at a downtown restaurant, and Mark volunteered to keep an eye on her. He parked his car across the street, in a spot with a clear view of the entrance, and waited. A couple of hours later, I got a text. Asterisk, all clear. She's inside with her colleagues. Looks professional. Nothing weird so far. Asterisk. When Emily came home that night, she showed me pictures of the event. Smiling faces, wine glasses, elegant lighting. It all seemed perfectly normal. But when I spoke to Mark the next day, his tone gave me pause. You sure everything was fine? I asked, studying his expression. He hesitated for a moment, then nodded quickly. Yeah, man. Looked legit. Nothing out of the ordinary. But his hesitation, that small, almost imperceptible pause, lingered in my mind. Mark was a terrible liar. The next opportunity came when Emily said she'd be visiting Mia again. This time, Ryan took the lead. He parked near Mia's house and watched for hours, texting me updates. Asterisk, lights are on. Saw her silhouette a couple of times. Looks like she's there. Asterisk. When Emily came home later that night, she carried an old photo album, claiming she and Mia had spent the evening reminiscing over childhood memories. The pictures she showed me seemed genuine, but something didn't sit right. When I casually asked Ryan later, did you see Mia herself? His response was evasive. No, but I saw movement in the windows. It was them for sure. Shadows in the windows weren't people. And Ryan's hesitation only added to my growing doubts. The breaking point came when Emily mentioned another night out with Mia, this time for drinks at a trendy downtown bar. Caleb offered to follow her. And hours later, he sent me a picture of Emily and Mia, sitting at a table, drinks in hand. All good, Caleb texted. Asterisk, they're here. Just talking. Asterisk. But something about the photo caught my attention. The background, the decor, the lighting, it didn't match the bar Emily had mentioned. It didn't match any bar in that area. When I confronted Caleb about it, his response was clumsy, fumbling. Maybe I got the wrong angle. But they were there. I saw them. His fumbling, unconvincing answer confirmed what I had started to suspect. My friends weren't just observing Emily. They were covering for her. The truth hit me like a freight train. These men, My closest friends, the people I trusted most, they weren't on my side. They were part of it, complicit in Emily's lies. That night, as I sat alone in the garage, I replayed every interaction, every text, every hesitant, evasive conversation. The loyalty I had thought I could count on had been nothing but a facade. If Emily and my so-called friends thought they could outsmart me, they were wrong. They had underestimated me. The betrayal didn't break me. It only made my resolve stronger. Now, I wasn't just searching for answers. I was preparing for a reckoning. This wasn't just about Emily anymore. It was about all of them, and they had no idea what was coming. I couldn't shake the gnawing, sickening sense that the people I trusted most, the very pillars of my life, weren't just failing me. They were actively, deliberately working against me. The doubts had been growing for weeks, a slow, creeping poison. But it wasn't until that night at the bar, with Mark, Ryan, Ethan, and Caleb, that everything became crystal clear. It had started innocently enough. We had gathered at our usual spot, a comfortable, unpretentious hole-in-the-wall bar we'd been frequenting for years. The smell of stale beer and fried food hung heavy in the air, and the dim, forgiving lighting made it easy to pretend that everything was normal. But it wasn't. I had ordered a beer, leaned back in my chair, and just watched them. Mark was unusually quiet, sipping his drink like it was his first one ever. Ryan kept glancing at his phone, his laughter a little too loud, a little too forced, every time someone cracked a joke. Ethan and Caleb, usually the loudest, most boisterous members of our group, were unusually subdued. The air was thick with a tension that no one was willing to acknowledge. So I did. I swirled the beer in my glass. "Thanks for helping me out with Emily," I said, my voice carefully, dangerously even. "I know it's been a lot to ask." Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Yeah, man. No problem. Anything for you." Ryan nodded quickly, his eyes darting to mine for only a split second before he looked away. It was the way they avoided my gaze, the frantic, nervous energy that was radiating from our table, that confirmed what I had been dreading. These weren't men who were helping me get to the truth. They were men who were hiding it. I took a long, slow sip of my beer, letting the silence stretch until it became unbearable. Then, I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "You know," I said, "I've been thinking about that night Caleb sent me the photo of Emily and Mia at the bar." Caleb froze, his hand halfway to his drink. "Yeah? What about it?" "The background didn't match the bar she said she was going to," I said evenly. "It didn't match any bar in that area, actually. I checked." His hand dropped to the table. Maybe I got the wrong angle," he said quickly, but his voice wavered. "And Ryan," I continued, turning to him, "you said you saw her at Mia's house. But you never actually saw Mia. Just shadows in the window." Ryan opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. "And Mark," I said, my gaze now locked on him. "When you followed her to that work dinner, you said everything looked fine. But you hesitated when I asked you about it. What?" Mark just stared at his drink, refusing to meet my eyes. It was Ethan who finally broke the silence. "Look, Jason," he said, his voice a pathetic attempt at placation. "This is getting out of hand. Maybe you're just overthinking things. Emily's a great woman. She wouldn't." I cut him off. "Save it," I said. "I know what's going on." Ethan's mouth snapped shut, and the others exchanged nervous, guilty glances. The final, damning blow came when Caleb, who'd had one too many drinks, stumbled off to the bathroom, leaving his phone on the table. The screen lit up with a notification, and without thinking, I picked it up. The group chat, a chat that I was clearly not a part of, was right there at the top of the screen. "Mark, make sure he doesn't suspect anything. Asterisk. Ryan, if he asks, say you saw her with colleagues. Asterisk. Caleb, it's your turn to cover for her this time. Asterisk. Emily, he's starting to notice. Stay sharp. Asterisk." The words blurred as a white-hot, blinding rage surged through me. My friends, the people I trusted most, the people I would have done anything for, had been lying to my face. And Emily, she wasn't just lying. She was orchestrating the whole thing. When Caleb returned, I placed his phone back on the table without a word. He looked at me, then at the phone, and a slow, sickening realization dawned on his face. "Everything okay, man?" he asked weakly. I smiled, a cold, calculated, humorless thing that felt foreign on my face. "Oh, everything's fine, Caleb," I said. "Just fine. I finished my beer, paid my tab, and walked out of the bar without another word. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the full weight of their betrayal pressed down on me. Emily's lies were bad enough, but the fact that my closest friends, my brothers, had been complicit, that was a wound I wasn't sure I could ever recover from. But anger wasn't what I felt anymore. Anger was hot, fleeting. What settled over me that night was cold, sharp, and unyielding. It was clarity. The lies had been confirmed. The betrayal had been exposed. Now it was time to act. They thought they were playing me. They had underestimated me. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning. Lying in bed that night, the house silent except for Emily's steady, even breathing beside me, I couldn't stop replaying the betrayal in my mind. My wife, my closest friends. They had all conspired against me, treating me like some clueless, pathetic fool. The group chat had been the final straw, the cold, hard, irrefutable proof that stripped away any lingering doubts, any last, desperate hopes that I was just being paranoid. But I wasn't broken. Not yet. If they thought I would just sit idly by, allowing them to laugh at me behind my back, they didn't know me at all. Anger was no longer the fuel that was driving me. It was something colder, sharper. Determination. I wasn't going to yell or storm out. No dramatic accusations, no hasty, emotional confrontations. That would be too easy for them to dismiss. Too easy for Emily to spin into some story about me being unstable or controlling. If I was going to expose her and the so-called friends who had so willingly betrayed me, I needed a plan. And not just any plan. It had to be precise, calculated, and executed with a cold, patient, surgical precision. The first step was to gather more evidence. I needed undeniable, irrefutable proof. Something so concrete, so damning, that no amount of smooth talking, no amount of practiced, plausible lies could refute it. The kind of evidence that would not only expose their lies, but leave them scrambling to pick up the pieces of their shattered, respectable lives. I started small, making subtle changes to my own behavior. No more questioning Emily directly. No more offhand, sarcastic comments about her whereabouts. I wanted her to feel secure. I wanted her to believe that her flawless, intricate web of lies was holding strong. But behind the scenes, I began my work. I called Jake again, my old college buddy who worked security at the hotel. I explained everything. I need you to go further this time, I said. I need you to get me photos. Timestamps. Whatever you can. I need to know exactly who she's meeting. Jake, to his credit, was horrified by what I told him. He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the idea of playing private eye. But in the end, his loyalty to me won out. He agreed. Next, I reached out to a private investigator, someone with no personal ties to Emily or my friends, someone who could dig deeper than I ever could. The investigator was thorough, professional, and discreet. And within days, the pieces began to fall into place. Bank statements, revealing a string of unaccounted-for expenses, hotel rooms, expensive dinners, gifts I had never seen. GPS data from Emily's car, showing a pattern of detours and stops she had never mentioned. And photos of her and the man in the gray suit, standing too close on the hotel terrace, sharing what looked like more than just a casual, professional conversation. With every new piece of information, my resolve hardened. But this wasn't just about Emily anymore. My so-called friends, Mark, Ryan, Ethan, and Caleb, they had played their part too. They had covered for her, lied to my face, smirked as they thought they were keeping me in the dark. I decided I wouldn't confront them one by one. No, that would dilute the impact. I needed them all together, in the same room, so they could see and feel the full, crushing weight of what they had done. The idea came to me as I sat in the garage late one night, the faint, familiar buzz of the radio in the background. An invitation. Casual, unassuming, but impossible to ignore. Come over for drinks this weekend, I would tell them. Just us. Like old times. And they would come, because they wouldn't suspect a thing. When the time came, I would have everything ready. The photos, the screenshots of the messages, the financial records, all laid out, undeniable and damning. They would have no room to wiggle, no way to spin their lies. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about clarity. It was about restoring the balance they had so carelessly, so callously, disrupted. I wasn't looking for justice. Justice was fair, impartial. I wanted something more. Something personal. Let them think they've won, for now. The game is still in play, and I'm about to rewrite the rules. The night of the gathering had finally arrived. My living room was spotless, the faint, warm aroma of whiskey lingering from the crystal decanter I had set out on the bar. I had invited them all: Mark, Ryan, Ethan, Caleb, and of course, Emily. They thought this was just another night to catch up, to laugh, to drink, to pretend that everything was fine. But I wasn't laughing. Not anymore. They arrived on time, their usual easy banter filling the room. Emily was radiant, as always, her charm as disarming as it was deceptive. She laughed at Ethan's jokes, handed Caleb a drink, and even leaned over to kiss me on the cheek, a cold, dry press of her lips against my skin. If she was nervous, she didn't show it. I played my part perfectly. I poured drinks. I exchanged pleasantries. I laughed at their jokes. But every word they spoke felt hollow. Every laugh grated against my raw nerves. These weren't my friends. They were conspirators in my wife's lies, willing, active participants in my humiliation. I waited until the drinks had been poured, until the laughter had settled into a comfortable, easy hum. Then, I stood, my own glass in my hand, and raised it for a toast. To friendship, I said, my voice steady, the edges sharpened with a fine, bitter irony. And to honesty, the glue that holds us all together. They raised their glasses, toasting with smiles that would soon vanish from their faces. I reached for the large, manila folder I had placed beneath the coffee table and set it down with a deliberate, quiet precision. The room fell silent, their eyes flicking between the folder and my face. "What's that?" Mark asked, his voice a little too casual. "Proof," I said, my tone as cold as the air that seemed to have suddenly, inexplicably, filled the room. Of everything. One by one, I laid it all out. The photos of Emily on the hotel terrace with the man in the gray suit. The screenshots of the messages from the group chat, their own words, their own lies, staring back at them. The financial discrepancies, the hotel bills, the expensive gifts. The private investigator's final, damning report. Emily's face drained of color as she stared at the photos, her perfect, practiced composure cracking, shattering, for the first time. "Jason, I can explain." "Don't." I cut her off, my voice low, but firm. "This isn't the time for more lies." I turned to Mark, Ryan, Ethan, and Caleb, their faces a pale, sweaty mixture of guilt and panic. "And you," I said, letting my gaze linger on each of them. "My so-called friends. You thought you were so clever, didn't you? Covering for her. Lying to my face. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out?" Ethan stammered something unintelligible, but I wasn't interested in his excuses. "Get out," I said, my voice steady, devoid of all emotion. "All of you. Leave my house. Leave my life. You've taken enough from me." Mark was the first to stand, his head bowed, as he shuffled toward the door. The others followed, their silence louder, more damning than any apology could have ever been. That just left Emily. She stood there, in the center of the room, staring at me with wide, tear-filled eyes, her lips trembling as she searched for words. "I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered. "You already did," I replied, my voice cold, final. "And now, you'll have to face the consequences." I handed her an envelope. It contained the divorce papers, neatly signed and waiting for her signature. "You have until tomorrow morning to get your things and leave," I said, stepping past her, toward the door. "This marriage is over." As I closed the door behind her, leaving her alone in the wreckage of her own making, the silence of the house was deafening. But for the first time in weeks, it felt like the kind of silence I could live with. The game was over, and I had won. Not just the battle, but my freedom, my clarity, my life. And that was enough.